So today we're going to be comparing 3 triggers, talk about the pull weights and the setups and the price, and that way you guys can make a more informed buying decision on which Glock trigger fits you best. So which 3 triggers are we going to talk about? Well, number 1, the Apex trigger. I've talked about this trigger a lot in previous videos, and it is currently my number 1 favorite of off-the-shelf triggers that you can buy. And you'll see why when we dive up close. Number 2, the Overwatch Precision trigger. Now this trigger, I've had it for quite a while. I got it in March. I think I reviewed it in April. Same price typically as the Apexes, but it's a little bit different. The way it feels, the way it breaks, the way it pulls, etc. And then the 3rd trigger we're gonna be talking about, and I just recently acquired this one, the Agency Arms Glock Trigger. This trigger is a little bit different, and I didn't know what to expect because, you know, over the past year and a half, I've heard a lot of people say they love it. I've heard a lot of people say they hate it. We're gonna talk about, you know, travel, reset. We're gonna talk about the types of brakes they have, how hard they pull, etc. So let's dive up close, take a look at these, and see which one you guys like best. All right, guys, so we got all 3 of our little triggers here that we're gonna talk about today. First off, I wanna talk about initial finger placement on the trigger. Which part of your finger are you most accurate with? You know, I know we've all seen those charts where it's like, don't put this, or don't do this, or don't do this. Problem is, everyone's hands are different, and so not everyone's gonna be more accurate with just the tip of their finger on there. Some people are more accurate with just the first knuckle. So find out which part of your finger are you most accurate with. Then what you're gonna do is you grab it in a full grip. We're gonna see if the initial placement lands where you're most accurate. Now for the Glock 19 and the Apex, it is perfect. You know, I don't know if I have long fingers or not, but my finger reaches approximately to the end of this trigger guard right here. And I'm most accurate right here with just a little bit hanging off, but not to the first knuckle. And so for me, with the Apex, my finger, it definitely lands in the right spot where I can pull the trigger without that front sight or that red dot moving. Now these two, their forward set in the reset position are at the same identical range. The Apex is sitting just millimeters further forward than the Agency Arms, and the same thing occurs with this one. So what that means is my initial finger placement is gonna land further in, and as you can see, that is just a hair too far for me. Now, one way to fix that, if you have a Gen 4 frame, is to add a back strap. Pushes your hand further back so you can get that initial placement correctly. And the same thing occurs with the Overwatch. I get a little bit too much versus here, I get just enough. And I know you can't really see it, you know, just looking at my finger, but that's the perfect amount. That's too much. If you have longer fingers and you're more accurate towards the, you know, the pad of your finger, then the Apex will probably be the best fit for you. However, if you do have a Gen 4 frame and you have the back straps you can put on it, you can definitely make these work better. We're gonna talk about the pre-travel, the wall, and the break. And this is kind of important. Some people want a really hard wall that they hit, and then they can break through it like breaking glass. On this one, you got that wall, boom, and then you break through it, okay? Come out. You know, the reset and everything is nice, but the initial trigger press for me is when you go to pull it, just say slapping the trigger. I know you shouldn't always slap the trigger, but trust me, if you're scared, you're gonna slap it. So with this one, if I slap it, I get that little stutter because of the wall. With the Agency, not so much. It's more of a smooth feel. There's the take up. Break. It's got a rolling break. It doesn't have the hard break. Now this one has a rolling break as well. And then your wall isn't very hard. So here's the wall, and then there's a little bit of travel and then the break. Boom. And there's your reset. A lot of people don't like the way the Apex trigger looks, but the moment they feel it, they want it. I've been in many gun stores and they're looking at triggers, and then I say, here, you wanna try mine? And they're like, oh my God, I want that. With this Agency Arms trigger, there's a little stutter in the pre-travel right here. See that? I don't know if the camera's getting that. Right there. I don't know why it's not smooth because everything's polished on this trigger. Whereas with the Overwatch, it's a little smoother. See that? Now let's talk about what you get for the money on these triggers. So with this trigger, all you get is a trigger bar and a trigger shoe. You don't get a connector or anything. And I've tried this with multiple connectors, and that hard wall still exists regardless of your connector. So I've tried this with minus connectors. I've tried this with the ZEV connectors. I've tried this with 3.5 connectors. The wall still exists just like that. It's just easier to break through with different connectors. But you're gonna get the trigger shoe and a trigger bar. And this trigger bar has what they call an MP3 coating on it. The Robar MP3 coating does have a lifetime guarantee not to wear off. Now, with that said, you will see parts of it where it gets shiny, where it rubs. But I looked at this under a really good magnifying glass, and I can attest that it's not coming off. It's just getting more polished, so to speak. This trigger right here retails for $120 to $130, and all you get is a trigger bar and a trigger shoe. Let's look at the Agency Arms trigger right here. Now with this trigger, you're gonna notice something very, very different. And it's different from both of these triggers. So on the Agency Arms, you're gonna notice that it has a recontoured head on the trigger, and it's polished. And they actually, I think, did a good job on it. Whereas this one, it's just got the stock angle right here. So that way you guys know. So there's that one. $150, you get the trigger bar, the trigger shoe, trigger bar, and a connector. It has a recontoured head on the trigger. This brake right here is kind of interesting. It's not quite a hard brake, and it's not quite a rolling brake. So the rolling brake is more so geared towards the Apex, and the hard brake is more geared towards the Overwatch Precision. So this is kind of like a middle ground for you. Moving on, let's look at the Apex here. Now with the Apex trigger kit, you have options. Now, I've polished mine. They don't come polished. But you can get either the trigger shoe and put it on your own trigger bar. Those are about $79. If you want it already pre-installed onto the trigger bar, and you buy a trigger bar and trigger shoe, about $100. But for about $20 more, you can get the Glock minus connector, and then you also get this beautiful rounded safety plunger right here, and I love that. On the left, we have the Apex rounded safety plunger. On the right, we have the OEM that I just polished. And the roundness makes a huge difference. So for about $120 to $130, you get the full kit. You get the trigger shoe, the trigger bar, the connector, and the rounded safety plunger. And that, in my opinion, is the best deal. So let's look at this one. You got your take up. Not bad, a little bit of slack, never hurts anyone. Then you got your brake. Then you got your reset. Very positive reset. I love this trigger. And I've put thousands and thousands of rounds through this trigger, and I've had it for exactly a full year. And it's been holding up like a champ. And what's interesting about this trigger is it is the only aftermarket trigger that is actually approved for duty use with some police departments. I don't remember which departments, but when I was at the Apex Tactical facility, they were telling me that police departments were starting to approve this for duty use. And I even had a guy comment on one of my videos that his department lets him use Apex triggers. So for a lot of people out there, they say, hey, if law enforcement can't carry it, I'm not going to carry it. Pretty interesting to know. So let's look at the trigger weight and what you can expect. Okay, so I have each of these triggers set up in the configuration in which you can purchase them. This one has all OEM internals. Just the trigger and trigger bar are from Overwatch Precision. So let's see what kind of trigger pull we get. All right. So this one, pulling right at 5 pounds. Let's do one more for consistency's sake. All right. Right at 5 pounds. Beautiful. Very consistent as well. So that's the Overwatch Precision, the Agency Arms trigger. And this one is all OEM internals. It's just the Agency Arms trigger with the minus connector that comes with it. Okay, so this one pulled right under 4 pounds. Looks like 3.9. Let's try another one. And then that one pulled right at 4 pounds, 4.1. So between 3.9 and 4 pounds for this trigger. And that's a good carry weight in my opinion. This trigger always gives me crap because it's slightly curved on the end. So I always have to put my finger on it to make sure that this trigger this pull gauge stays steady and consistent. All right, so this one pulled about 3.6, 3.7 pounds. Right at 3.5. So, and that's about what I get. Now this is the full kit, and this is after it's been broken in for about a year. Now when you first get this, it might pull around 4 to 4.5 pounds, but as time goes on and you put some wear on it, it breaks in very nicely, but it never gets spongy. But it makes for a consistent pull. It's like it's gliding on rails, so to speak, and then you have your rolling brake. Love it. So let's jump up top real quick. We'll talk about my final thoughts on these and which one I rank number 1, number 2, and number 3. Back up top. So there you have it, guys. We looked at the travel, what the pre-travel looks like, what the reset looks like, what the over travel looks like, and what the pull weights are. Now, in my opinion, guys, you know, we got a couple of different price ranges here for these triggers. I definitely prefer the full kit that comes with the rounded plunger and the connector. I think that is honestly, of these three, the best deal that you can get. It just works. Trigger right here since December of last year, thousands of rounds later, and it runs like a top. Love it. Overwatch Precision. Now this trigger has pretty much like a cult-like following of people who love it. Now with this one, you know, there's a reason it's in the Glock 26, and it's based on what I was showing you earlier when I come down where the index finger initially lands on the trigger shoot. That's why it's not in the 19. I will say, you know, with this trigger, I've tried it with multiple connectors. You know, right now it's got the stock in there, rounded plungers and things like that. Now, like I showed you up close, this trigger has a very hard wall. And if you like that, this is definitely the trigger for you, because you can literally pull it up to that wall and just hold it there until, you know, you're ready to pull. And that's cool. A lot of people like that. I prefer, like I said, you know, with the Apex, this rolling brake. The wall's not as hard. I personally prefer that. I like the fact with this trigger where however far out it is, I can pull it all the way through without any stuttering. Whereas with this one, I have to take up the slack before I can press this trigger. Otherwise, I get a little hiccup in my trigger pull. Apex is about $120, $130 for the full kit, whereas this one is $120, $130 just for a trigger shoe and a trigger bar. So keep that in mind. Now, moving on to the Agency Arms. I will say they do actually recontour the head of the trigger bar, which is nice. And it is polished, which is even nicer. You know, the Apex isn't polished. I mean, it's not hard to polish it, but it isn't polished. And then Overwatch Precision isn't polished, but it does have that Robar NP3 coating on it, which some people kind of like, some people don't. So with this one, you get the trigger shoe, you get the trigger bar, and you saw that recurved trigger head that's on the trigger bar. And then you get basically a Glock minus connector. That's what it is. I feel like I'm on the fence with it. It's almost like the best of both worlds between these two. Well, with this one, you know, like I showed you up close, you get that really defined wall that you can hit and rest on. That is nice, but it's also a rolling brake. Now, the downsides to this trigger is there's a little bit of stutter on the pre-travel, which I showed you up close, and I've went through and made sure there was no burrs on the trigger bar, no burrs on the connector, and I don't know where that little stutter is coming from, but if I do figure it out, I'll let you guys know. Some people have said that they're very spongy triggers. Now, as you can see up close, yeah, there's a little bit of a pre-travel before the break. So basically what I mean by that is you got your slack to the wall, and then there's a little bit of movement from the start of the wall to the actual break. And that's what people mean by sponginess. Now for me, it's not very spongy. You know, I hit that and it breaks right through. Right now, I got 450 rounds. It hasn't become spongy or anything like that, but I do get mixed reviews from you guys and other, you know, YouTubers that I've spoken with. Maybe that has something to do with their quality control. I don't know because I have a sample size of one, but I can say with the one that I do have, aside from that initial little stutter, it's actually pretty darn good. I was actually like, wow, I can press this trigger without the front sights moving without an issue. So that's nice. Not all triggers I can do that with. This one is the most expensive of the three. This one's about $150. You get the recontoured trigger bar, you get the flat trigger shoe with the index point, and you get a connector. For me, the winner is the Apex. So I would say the Agency is a close second as far as the way that it breaks. However, for smoothness, I would got to give it to the Overwatch Precision. Between these two, the smoother one is the Overwatch, but the one with the rolling break is the Agency. So you're gonna have to kind of be a toss-up. So number one, Apex. For smoothness, number two is gonna be the Overwatch Precision, and number three is gonna be the Agency. But for the way the trigger wall feels, number two is gonna be the Agency, and number three is gonna be the Overwatch. Hope this makes sense. I will be doing more videos about the other triggers. You know, we will get to those later. Let me know if you have any other questions, guys. And until next time, I love you and try to stay sexy.